Did Brett Yormark really poke the bear like that? And the better question is, will Texas make him regret it?
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we discuss Brett Yormark's biased comments against the Texas Longhorns football team yesterday. In the second segment, we talk about the Texas football team and will they make Brett Yormark regret those comments this season. And in the last segment, Steve Sarkisian has said that the two deep should be finalized by this Saturday. Not sure if we're getting a depth chart this year or not, but I give my guess on who the projected starters will be on September 2nd against Rice. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I've continued to say it because it continues to be true. We are closer and closer to the football season. We are now in the single digits, 9 days away from Texas football, 2 days away from college football, period. You can smell the grass. You can taste the barbecue. You can taste the beer or whatever you drink on game days, but it's almost here. And I know we're all very excited for the Texas football season, maybe everybody except for Brett Yormark, right? And I've been on record, saying that I really like the hire of Brett Yormark, and I really like the things that he's done since he's taken over as the commissioner. And I've been on record in saying that I was excited about the future of the Big 12, and it would be a league that I continue to, pay close attention to and watch, even though Texas and Oklahoma are departing to the SEC. And I thought that, Brett Yormark came in to a tough situation, and he's handled it really well. Obviously, no matter how many schools you add, you can't replace the University of Texas and the University of Oklahoma. Those are two blue bloods, two historic universities that have historically, been at the top of college football. Even, with the down years recently for the University of Texas, they're still top 10 in wins all time, right? It's one of the most historic programs in the sport. And we know what Oklahoma has done recently and throughout their history, right? And there's just no replacing the two cash cows in the Big 12, the two biggest brands in the Big 12. And so that's certainly a loss, losing those schools to the SEC. But I thought based on the opportunity and what was put on his plate, he's done a really good job. I think he's a businessman, and he's done a really good job in terms of the branding of the Big 12. We saw at the Big 12 championship game, the collab with Bape. I thought that was super dope. And he's done a really good job of just getting his base excited, right? I would think that Texas and Oklahoma aren't necessarily his base anymore. And based on his comments yesterday, it would seem that way. It kind of feels like everybody has put us into the SEC already. And so he's focused on, the rest of the schools in the Big 12 and, assuring them that their future will be bright, even without Texas and Oklahoma. And I think he's done a really good job of that. I think everybody in the Big 12 that will be in the Big 12 continuing next year is very excited about the future of the conference under Brett Yormark. I also know that even though Texas and Oklahoma fans are probably down on Brett Yormark right now, and there's just a lack of trust, between Texas and Oklahoma fans and the Big 12 conference, rightfully so, we do have to give him credit for, accelerating our exit to the SEC, right? He very well could have came in and said, Texas and Oklahoma are our biggest brands. There's no incentive for me to let them go to the SEC early. You will be playing Big 12 football in 2023 and 2024. And that is not the case. We will be playing SEC football next year because Brett Yormark accelerated our exit to the SEC. So we have to give him credit for that, right? Because obviously we do not want to spend an extra year in the Big 12, a conference we already don't trust, right? And although, like I said, you can't replace Texas and Oklahoma, I thought he did a good job of bringing in schools like Cincinnati, U of H, BYU, and UCF that have had some level of success in their respective conferences, right? And then when we started to see the demise of the Pac-12, now the Pac-4, he capitalized on that, right? And brought in some schools that may sustain, the Big 12 for the long term, right? I know we've talked a lot about conference realignment and, maybe the SEC and the Big 10 becoming the two major conferences, but I actually think the Big 12 will more than hold their own in the future, right? And he was able to go get, Coach Prime in Colorado, and he might be one of the biggest brands in the sport right now. Colorado might be one of the biggest brands in the sport right now. You go get Arizona and Arizona State, and then you go get Utah, who's been really good in terms of football for a long time in the Pac-12. So I do think that the future of the Big 12 is bright, and I do think that Brett Yormark is a really good commissioner, and this will be a really good league moving forward. But, and here comes the but. Yesterday, he took a stab at the University of Texas that I was not expecting. And now I think that all Texas fans should be looking at Brett Yormark a little sideways, right? And continue to look at the Big 12, the conference that we have to play in for one more year, a little sideways. And so I'm on Twitter, like I always am, right? And I see a tweet, and it's a quote from Brett Yormark, but it's just a picture, no video, right? It's a quote saying Brett Yormark is speaking to a crowd of Texas Tech people, right? Not sure if it's Texas Tech fans, boosters, whoever. And he tells Joey McGuire, basically against Texas, you need to take care of business, right? But it's just like a tweet. It's just words. And then in quotations, it's not even the full quote. It just says, take care of business. So I'm like, okay, I know how journalism works. I know how the media works. I know how clickbait works. I'm like, there's no way that the commissioner of the Big 12 that Texas and Oklahoma still occupy would come out and say something that openly biased against the University of Texas, right? I'm even in group chats at this point defending Brett Yormark. I'm like, nah, that's clearly clickbait. I got to hear the whole, clip. I'm like, he didn't mean that. He didn't say anything that openly biased against the University of Texas. It's probably taken out of context just to get Texas fans mad on Twitter, right? I'm like defending Brett Yormark. I'm like, I need to see the video first. And then somebody dropped the video, and I'm like, oh my God. So you listen to this and tell me what you think.
In addition, candidly, we were able to get Texas and Oklahoma out a year early. That was a big deal for us, and I think all of you, okay? And Coach, I'm not going to put any pressure on you, but I'm going to be in Austin for Thanksgiving, okay? And you better take care of business like you did right here in Lubbock last year.
What? I'm all in the group chats. I'm like, maybe it was a joke. It was taken out of context. And then I listened to it and I'm like, that's not taken out of context. That's clearly biased, right? And I understand why there's a lack of trust between Texas fans, Oklahoma fans, and the Big 12, because you feel like since Texas has made the decision to go to the SEC, there may have been some open bias, especially in terms of, refereeing against those two schools. I cannot blame Texas fans for thinking that they may get shafted by the referees this year. Now, that's never been my position because I always think there's a football reason, right? Always, right? Even last year when we lost to Alabama, there were two really egregious calls, right? The safety that was not called on Bryce Young, and then the holding that was not called on Bryce Young when Ryan Watts missed the sack last year. But there's always a football reason. We got into scoring position 6 times, scored 1 touchdown, had 4 field goals, and had 1 block, right? If we capitalize on those scoring position opportunities and score touchdowns, we probably beat Alabama. People talk about the Oklahoma State game where Texas got called for 14 penalties. Oklahoma State didn't get called for a single penalty, right? Obviously, on the surface, that looks really bad. But in that game, we had a double-digit halftime lead. If we finish that game, are we complaining about the officiating? No. In that game, Quinn Ewers was 19 for 49 with 30 incompletions. If we finish that game, are we talking about officiating? Probably not, right? If Quinn Ewers plays a little better, I should say. So there's always a football reason, which is why I try to stay away from complaining about the refs, especially pre-complaining about the refs in the offseason, saying we're going to get shafted at some point this year, right? We got to let the players go out there and decide that themselves. But like I said, I cannot blame Texas fans for feeling like the Big 12 is openly against Texas and feeling like the referees may be openly against Texas when Brett Yormark is putting on wax that he'll be in Austin and Joey McGuire, the head coach of the Texas Tech Red Raiders that are in the Big 12, needs to take care of business against Steve Sarkisian and the Texas Longhorns that are in the Big 12, right? That literally makes no sense to me. I don't know how that's ethical. I don't know how that's fair. I don't know how you could just come out and say that without repercussion, but clearly that's the move in the new Big 12, right? So, he's entitled, to say what he wants to say. And clearly, he's doing a good job of, riling up his new and future base, after Texas and Oklahoma leave. But I just don't think there's any way that that's professional. I'm not trying to be the person that super complains about it, because at the end of the day, as I'll talk about in the next segment, Texas has every opportunity to make him eat those words on the field, right? And that's what matters the most. But I just cannot understand how the commissioner of a conference that the University of Texas is in can come out and be so openly biased against the University of Texas and say, I'm glad we got them out of here. And Joey Maguire, you need to take care of business like you did in Lubbock last year when you get to Austin. Those comments are crazy, but like I said, I'll talk about in the next segment. Texas has every opportunity to make Brett Yormark eat those words. A quick word from our sponsors, and then I just told you what we're about to talk about. He got me excited on a Thursday morning with those crazy comments. Sheesh. Brett Yormark wildin', ain't he? For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that that part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. You know, like I said in the last segment, I'm not sure if those comments are out of bounds or not. You know, they feel out of bounds to me, but obviously he's the commissioner of the Big 12, and, you know, there probably won't be any repercussions, you know, that I see coming. And, you know, at the end of the day, like I said, he has to rile up his new base, and he's certainly done that. And like I said, people are excited for Big 12 football in the future, right? But he's pushed his chips to the table, and he's openly shown bias against the University of Texas. And in a way, the University of Texas and Oklahoma have pushed their chips to the middle of the table because they said, we're leaving this conference and going to the SEC, where there are more opportunities for athletics. It's a better conference. It just means more, right? And Texas deserves to be in that type of conference with what they've achieved historically. And I'm sure Oklahoma feels the same way, right? So now there is a rivalry in a sense, right? There is some tension in a sense between the Big 12 and Texas and Oklahoma. And that was already the case. But Brett Yormark is coming out and essentially solidified it. Like, yeah, we don't like y'all either, and we can't wait till y'all leave, right? That's cool, right? So now, to me, it feels like legacies are on the line. And legacies were already on the line because you're talking about a Texas team that has not won the Big 12 since 2009, has, for the most part, disappointed since that year, right? And has not achieved nearly as much in this conference over the last 10 years as we feel like we should have. And most people feel like we should have based on the level of talent that we've brought in. Now, I know, you know, there are times, and there's been a lot of years on the roster where maybe the talent wasn't dispersed as evenly as it is now. And there are times where we haven't invested in the trenches, specifically on the offensive line, how we have the last couple of years. But for the most part, Texas has had enough talent to compete in the conference most years, and definitely should have won a conference title since 2009, right? Regardless of who we've had at the trenches, right? Texas has had enough talent to win the Big 12, and they've underachieved, right? But we feel like this is the year, you know, in the last year of the Big 12 that they can get over that hump and, you know, kind of go out with a bang, you know, walk off into the sunset with the Big 12 title. And I'm sure Oklahoma is trying to do the same, you know, and they'll be very motivated to do that this year. But like I said, legacies are on the line, right? Because Brett Yormark came out and he stamped his flag. And he told Texas Tech to go take care of business in Austin on senior night in their last Big 12 game ever, outside of maybe the Big 12 championship. So their last home Big 12 game ever, regular season Big 12 game ever. He told Texas Tech to go take care of business. Like that wasn't going to motivate our fans to show up and show out at DKR. Like that wasn't going to motivate our team to come in there and show up and show out, right? In Texas, we know legacies are on the line because this team needs to win the Big 12 this year before they go to the SEC, because everybody is rooting against you. And all of these teams that you're playing against, they're motivated to make sure that you don't win the Big 12, right? We already know that each and every week you're going to get teams' best shot because you're Texas, right? They're going to come out and play hard and do everything it takes to win because you're Texas. We saw that last year with Texas Tech where they went for it 8 times on 4th down, right? That means something to every other school to knock off Texas. Every school is invested in making sure that Texas or Oklahoma do not leave the Big 12 this year with the Big 12 championship in football, right? And so if Texas underachieves again, because they're the clear favorite to win the Big 12 this year, they have all of the pieces that we've requested, right? They have the coaching staff that we've requested. There are no excuses in terms of them winning the conference this year. If we underachieve again, then you don't have a chance to redeem yourself next year, right? For the entirety of however long this current setup of the conference lasts, right, starting in 2024, you'll have people in the Big 12 always saying Texas left without winning a Big 12 championship since 2009. And even when they had their most talent in over a decade, they still underachieved. That'll be the narrative. That'll follow Texas into the SEC, right? But if they can come out this year and shut everybody up, not play with their food, and go into DKR on the day after Thanksgiving, whatever day that is, and beat the crap out of Texas Tech and get revenge last year for the way that Joey McGuire was talking crazy, and get revenge to Brett Yormark, who is currently talking crazy, then all of that is null and void, right? And so I think that this Texas team needs to take this personally, because now there's a line drawn in the sand. Like I said, this is a rivalry. There's tension, and somebody's going to come out on top. It's either going to be Brett Yormark in the new Big 12 or the University of Texas. And I want to ask you, and I've been kind of riled up because I've been watching, that Swamp Kings, documentary on Netflix, and you just seeing how gritty that Florida team was, how hard that Florida team was. And even though they left a lot of the documentary about how much dog was really in those players, it just got me excited about that era of football, reminiscing about that era of football. And I started to think about, those 2005 Texas teams, right? That era under Mac Brown with Vince Young. And I thought about it and I said, do you think they would let Brett Yormark say that and get away with it? And then I thought about those Colt McCoy teams right after, right? And even though they didn't win the national championship, those are some of the best teams we've ever seen in college football. And I started to think, right, after I'm watching that documentary, I'm hyped up. And I'm like, would they let Brett Yormark in the Big 12 get away with that? Coming out openly saying Joey McGuire and Texas Tech better take care of business after they lost to them the previous year at home in DKR? Absolutely no way. So I'm looking at this Texas football team right now. I'm looking at Steve Sarkisian and his staff. I'm looking at Quinn Ewers, Xavier Worthy, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Ford, whoever's a leader on this team, Jalen Catalon, you name it, right? And I'm saying, are y'all really going to let Brett Yormark get away with this? Are y'all going to let Brett Yormark have the victory in the end? Are y'all going to let Brett Yormark have the last laugh? Are you going to make Brett Yormark present you with that Big 12 championship trophy in December after he came out and said openly that Joey McGuire better take care of business? After he came out openly and said that he was rooting against the University of Texas? After he came out openly and said that it was a win-win that we got Texas out of here early? And I know everybody's excited about that. He drew his line in the sand. He came out and put his stance, and it's clear as day that he is not rooting for any success from the University of Oklahoma or the University of Texas this year. And like I said, if this was this Vince Young team at 05, or just the Vince Young era period, or if it was the Colt McCoy team at 08 or 09, or just the Colt McCoy era period, they would not let Brett Yormark get away with those comments. So I'm looking at Steve Sarkisian, I'm looking at Quinn Ewers, and I'm looking at whoever, thinks they're a leader on this team this year. Are you going to let Brett Yormark get away with these comments? Are you going to let him get the last laugh? Are you going to make him present you with that Big 12 championship trophy in December as you head to the SEC, where it just means more? A quick word from our sponsors, and then I'm going to talk about the projected starters on this Texas football team. All right, here we go. Here we go. Like I said, I apologize if I got a little too amped. That Swamp Kings documentary got me excited, right? We need a Tim Tebow type on the Texas football team. All right. This show is sponsored by Betterhelp. Sometimes in life, we are faced with tough choices, and the path forward isn't always clear. Whether you're dealing with decisions around careers, relationships, or anything else, therapy helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life, so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. If you're thinking of starting therapy, then give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. All right. In the last segment, we're talking about the projected starters. And Steve Sarkisian said, I think in one of his media availabilities, or I just saw it on Twitter somewhere, so I'm not sure where he said it, that the two deep should be finalized by Saturday. Not sure if we'll get a depth chart this year. We did not get a depth chart last year. And I know we'll be really excited to see one because, there's starters that we're interested in seeing. But I think a lot of us are, interested in seeing who's on the two deep, right? Especially, maybe at the quarterback position and some other positions, right? But throughout the offseason, you get so many reports and, so many different tea leaves and things from the coaches and the players and all of that. You can kind of start to surmise who will be the starters and who will have a big impact on this Texas football team. So whether we get a depth chart on Saturday or not, we'll know soon enough in 9 days who are the starters and who is in the two deep for this Texas football team. I would hope to see all of them against Rice, right? That would mean that they took care of business and hopefully a few more times throughout the season. But on today's episode, I'm going to give my projected starters on September 2nd against Rice. So a lot of them are obvious. There's probably only 3 that have maybe been questionable throughout the offseason period. But, here goes nothing, right? Quinn Ewers, obviously, he's going to be your starting quarterback, and he's more than earned it. Excited to see the growth from last year. Jonathan Brooks, we've heard all offseason that he will be the bell cow, with Cedric Baxter likely being in the Roschon Johnson role from last year, and then Keelan Robinson staying in his role that he was in last season. Xavier Worthy has been our number 1 receiver for 2 straight years. That continues for a third. A.D. Mitchell will start opposite of him, the best receiver to play opposite of Xavier Worthy since probably forever, right? But definitely at the University of Texas. And then Jordan Whittington will be manning the slot. JT Sanders, of course, is your starting tight end, one of the best in the country at that position. Freshman All-American is now a sophomore, Kelvin Banks. Hopefully he can be an All-American once again this year. Hayden Conner at left guard. We know he's been in competition with Cole Hudson and, Big Nito all summer, but it doesn't seem like they've done enough to usurp Hayden Conner from that left guard position. So I think that he'll be there. Jake Majors at center, same thing. I think he just has too much of a grasp on this offense. He's too intelligent, and he's an underrated pass blocker, right? Maybe can't move people in the run game like you would expect, but I don't think he's a liability like people think as well. DJ Campbell at right guard, that's something we've talked about, one of the bigger battles, thus far in camp. And Cole Hudson won that job last year. He was an early enrollee, but I just think that DJ Campbell brings a unique and special skill set to that position. And we've heard all offseason about how he can move people in the run game, which is really important when you lose a Bijan Robinson and a Roschon Johnson. And then at right tackle, Christian Jones holding down that spot for one more year. And then we're going to move to the defensive side of the ball. We got Barron Terrell. We're starting with him at the edge position. We are expecting a bigger and better year from Barron Terrell, hopefully 7.5 plus sacks this year to really put him as one of the top edge rushers in the Big 12 and hopefully, in the country. That'll give this defense a big boost. Byron Murphy, he was preseason, first team Big 12, and I think he'll end up being regular season, first team Big 12, and one of the biggest reasons that Texas ends up in the Big 12 championship game in December and hopefully wins it. Alfred Collins, I think that he has probably improved his stock more than any Texas football player, this offseason. We came into the offseason having all the same concerns about him that we've had since 2020, right? The talent is there, but where's the consistency? And it seems that he has found that consistency now, right? And he's starting to really show up and show out for this Texas football team. So I think that Alfred Collins will start next to Byron Murphy. And I know a lot of people are thinking, well, then what happens with T'Vondre Sweat? We saw, I think it was in the first scrimmage, that they were kind of rotating T'Vondre Sweat and Ethan Burke based on the offense's personnel package. And I think that's what will happen this year because you're going to rotate T'Vondre Sweat a lot anyway, right? He's a big man. He's like 340 pounds. And so I think that, based on the offensive personnel, you'll either go some combination of Byron Murphy and Alfred Collins or Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat with Ethan Burke on the field, or there could be a package where Barron Terrell, Byron Murphy, Alfred Collins, and T'Vondre Sweat are on the field with Ethan Burke on the sideline. So I got 5 players there, but I think you'll see a lot of that mixing and matching, right? Jalen Ford, obviously, returning All-American, the leader of your defense, linebacker. He's going to be in the middle. David Benda at that weak side linebacker spot right now. I think eventually Anthony Hill takes his spot. We know that Anthony Hill will be on the field a lot as a pass rusher and just, kind of a special, unique player that Pete Kakowski can utilize. But like I said, I just don't think that David Benda, as resilient as he is, right, it can hold off Anthony Hill for a full football season. Jahdae Barron in the nickel at that star position. Expect a really good season from him. Ryan Watts on the outside. Hopefully he can hold his own in coverage this year, but he's a really good run support corner and just a really good leader on that defense. Terrence Brooks, excited to see him in a full-time role this year, and hopefully, he can come out and play like he did in the TCU game and the Washington game last year. Jalen Catalon, former all-SEC safety. They've kind of managed him throughout the offseason so that he can be full go throughout the season. And as I've said it, a million times, I'll say it one more time. If Jalen Catalon can stay healthy this year, this defense has the potential to be borderline elite in year 3 under Pete Kwiatkowski. And then Jaron Thompson, one of the leaders of the defense. I was really excited, about his play last year, his communication. And, I thought he was really good for us last year. I thought he deserved, possibly to be more than honorable mention Big 12 last year, but I think he'll make the first or second team this season. Just a really sound, solid, and good football player. So we know this team has a ton of talent. We know this team has a ton of depth. I cannot wait to see the official depth chart in the 2 deep, but this team has more than enough talent to go out and make Brett Yormark eat his words. And like I said, make him hand you that Big 12 championship trophy in December. We got to go take care of business, man, in our last year of the Big 12. Them boys hating on us. We're going to make them pay for it. Hook them. Peace.